To say that morning was the beginning of a nightmare is inaccurate as it is cliche. The beginning of the nightmare was the day I signed the papers buying that house. Or even further back when my husband thought so little about being caught cheating, he didn't even bother to put his pants back on and threw my house key back at me with a contemptuous flick of the wrist. No, that morning was just the start of a greater nightmare, my awakening. Each and every minute after that is as clear and reviewable as scenes from a movie to me. My eyes opening as I lifted myself out of bed, my bored inner monologue wondering what delightful screen my ex-husband had left me on my answering machine. A sudden stabbing pain under my toe, the moment I lifted up my foot and found my son's tooth, stained brown at the roots, lying on the carpet. I lifted my eyes and found a trail of teeth and brown fluid leading all the way to my bathroom. Josh was kneeling on the back of the toilet with his index finger in his mouth, dull expression on his face as he plucked another tooth from his gums, as easy as picking a hair from his head. I screamed as I dove at him, wrapping my arms around him, driven by motherly instinct to protect him with my body somehow. I had to fight to get his hands away from his mouth, which was already littered with bare space. I held his jaw with my hands as I surveyed his gum line, which did not seem to be bleeding at all. What could have possibly caused this? I ran over everything we had eaten over the past few days. The only thing to cause this kind of sudden dramatic tooth fallout that I knew of was scurvy. Really advanced scurvy. I tried calling the emergency number, only to discover why my ex hadn't left his daily abusive voicemail. The phone was dead. I tried to keep my voice calm as I packed Josh's jaw with ice and bundled him into the car. On top of everything else, he was beginning to run a fever. I drove like a maniac over to the pediatrician and waited while he stuck gloved fingers in my son's mouth. He was the very image of a small-town doctor, white-haired and dignified. His calmness just made me more unsettled. After examining Josh, the doctor tisked and shook his head. "Just shedding some baby teeth," he smiled warmly at me. "Give him some children's aspirin. If there's any pain, he'll pull through." I felt like I was going insane. Baby teeth? Yes. I don't mean to tell you your job, but I have never heard of someone shedding all of their baby teeth at once. Also, Josh has already lost some of his baby teeth. His lower incisors are permanent. The doctor chuckled and shook his head. "Well, I'm glad you're not gunning for my job then." He pulled off his gloves with a snap. "Children's aspirin, plenty of fluids." I want a second opinion. Now I felt like I had a fever. My whole body was burning with outrage at this whole damn town. I shouldn't have even bothered saying anything. The doctor shot me a contemptuous look. "Doctor shopping, ma'am? If you even suggest such a thing in my office, I am mandated reporter, and I will place a call to the proper authorities." I almost called his bluff. CPS would have loved to see the state of the town's children. But no, there was no deliberate vagueness I had came to expect. The proper authorities could be a couple of guys and a brick to bash my head in, for all I knew. I took my son and paid the secretary and drove home, stone-faced the whole time, moving in tighter and tighter spirals. "Honey," I said, "I'll get you some help, I promise." Josh leaned against the passenger door, looking aimlessly out the window. He nodded. "Does it hurt?" Josh shook his head. "Nope." His new mouth made the words sound strange. "It actually feels kind of funny." I drove in silence. I hit the stop sign a few blocks away from my house and just stopped. There were no cars on either side of me, or coming at me, or behind me. I just stayed in place because I lacked the willpower to go forward. The right-hand corner of the four-way stop was a little park barely big enough to be a lawn. It held a bench and a trash can. It almost held that damn shabby clown, twisting balloon animals for a gaggle of homely children. I had never been this close to him before. I admit I just stared as he twisted loop after loop of latex for those kids. Paint flaking and peeling from his neck, red grease grin painted high on his cheeks. He stood up and our eyes met. Struck me that he was not smiling inside that fake red grin. His eyes were worried. His gaze touched mine, then flicked to the right of me. He looked inquisitively back at me. I nodded ever so slightly. The clown looked, for lack of a better word, disturbed. He flicked his head to the side, indicating the open space that held the school and the slightly wooded area. A car behind me honked. I took my foot off the brake. Once home, I bundled Josh into his bed with an ice pack and some Pedialyte. It wasn't even a half hour before the first knock came. I knew exactly what was coming when I opened the door to the couple standing so close they nearly merged at the hip. "Is little Joshy home?" the woman cooed. "We didn't see him at school today. You know how Jody loves to play with him." "Josh is sick," I said robotically. "I'm keeping him out of school for now." "Oh boy, did the little tyke catch himself some spring fever?" The man peered past me like I was hiding my son from them. "No, his teeth fell out, all of them." They laughed as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, I remember when Jody was like that then," the husband said. "Moped around the whole damn morning." "Then?" I asked. "My son is older than Jody." They subtly winced. "You just send Josh over to the house this afternoon," the woman said coldly. "Once he's back to normal." I wanted to scream at them. This is not normal. None of this is normal, you freaks. "He'll still be sick then." She flushed slightly. "You're being very selfish, you know that. You're not the only one involved here." "I know I'm not." I shut the door in their faces. The stream of visits never let up. I couldn't care for my own son properly because I was forever having to answer the door. "We were just in the neighborhood, and we were worried. We don't want to trouble you, but everyone's been talking." I couldn't not answer the door because I knew what would come next. Welfare checks courtesy of the boys in green and purple. Concerned citizens breaking down my front door. No privacy, not even the illusion of it. In what little spare time I found, I sat at the table drinking wine. I barely got through a single glass. What could be doing it? Was it something in the air? Something in that chocolate milk they were so oddly insisting on giving to him? Was it a contact disease? Were they dragging my son off during school hours and sticking him with a needle? At some point, I realized I hadn't been up to see Josh in a while. The visits had petered off, and I became aware of how quiet it was in the house. Josh's nest I made him in front of the TV was empty, so was his bed and the bathroom. No, Josh was nowhere in the house. When I found him in the backyard, I damn near cried with relief. He was crouched down at the end of the garden I had yet to start. I felt like weeping as I walked up to him. "Josh, my precious, my only, they want to take you from me." Josh jumped up, holding his hands behind his back as I approached. "Josh, sweetie, are you all right?" Josh nodded. "I feel better, Mommy." Nauseatingly, I could see his mouth where the uneven kernels of his new teeth were already beginning to sprout. "Honey, what are you doing out here?" "I'm making the cat fly, Mommy. It's fun. Jody showed me. Want to see?" There was a mangy old cat tiptoeing along our back fence. Josh grabbed it off and took hold of its tail. Time started moving in slow motion. I knew what was going to do even before he started swinging the poor feline around by its tail. But I couldn't move fast enough to stop him in time. Josh held his arms out at full length as he twirled that cat like a lasso. I grabbed his wrist. The tail, lubricated by shed hair, slid out of his fist and sent the cat flying. It landed badly and limped away. I grabbed Josh's shoulders and shook him. "Josh, you must never do that again," I hissed. "That's awful and cruel. I will not allow you to be mean to animals. If your friends said that was funny, it is wrong. They are wrong." Josh was squinting up at me. I thought he was about to cry. Instead, he smiled quick as a flash and bopped me on my nose with his knuckles. It smarted. "Bop!" he said, and ran away laughing. I was rubbing my nose when I heard the wood creak. I looked up just in time to see the corner of my fence and fell back into place, and no sign of my son anywhere. Of course, there was a loose board. Of course, it was big enough for me to fit through. I stepped out the front door, rummaging in my purse for my keys. I found the guy from the auto body shop, elbow deep in my engine. "Oh, hey, Mrs. H." He looked up at me, expressionless. "Trying to fix your car. Something's wrong with this thing." He held up a grease-covered piece of metal that could have come from a jet for all I knew. "Take a few hours, maybe days." I looked over my lawn. Clown statues clustered over every spare bit of grass, sneering up at my house. It was like every busybody parent had left a clown or two as a parting gift. "Excuse me?" I said. I went inside and came back out with my ex-husband's old driver. I demolished each clown in a puff of plaster. Once the massacre was over, I looked over at the mechanic, sweating. "Evening," I said, and went back inside.